Dr. Marcia Sonity.
And I'm Dr. Caleb Moore.
And this is
the Free Smiles Podcast.
Let's talk about vaping, tobacco. Although vaping is more than just tobacco, as we all know. Well, I shouldn't say we all know, as we know.
I think as we know. Right. I don't think it's a known fact. Mm-hmm. It's become very popular in ages of like 20 to 34. There's been a huge increase. Well, I shouldn't say that. Actually, I think I just read that in the last year, there's been a decline in vaping.
Well, and this is maybe a little off topic, but I think the younger generation is also just using less substances in general, like alcohol use is down, and like tobacco use in general, and marijuana use is down in the generations below us, which I think is a great thing. But
well, yeah, I mean, I remember growing up, my mom was a big smoker. She
my
actually,
dad as well.
Yeah, stopped maybe like 10 years ago.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Congrats to her.
Yeah, cold turkey. She quit. Very impressive. But growing up with that secondhand smoke and in that environment, it was, lack of a better term, just gross, right? Like,
well, when I was growing up, there was smoking everywhere. There's smoking at restaurants. Mm-hmm. The barrier between half of the restaurant was like not even a wall. It's not like a wall. It's like when you go into like the Denny's, like the local Denny's, and this is like a Midwest thing. I don't think they have Denny's out here. And the wall that divided the restaurant was like, it was like this tall. Mm-hmm. So then there's like, it's not like the smoke stays on one part of the restaurant. And that was the same thing in like bars. Like when I started going to bars when I was 21, I don't even think it was like a few years later then they finally banned it where I lived. But in a lot of parts of the country still, smoking was allowed indoors for forever.
It was normal.
Yeah. It's very new to not have it being a thing.
Yep.
Which is why I also think once that was banned and then vaping came around, vaping was even more prevalent because then you could do that indoors without having the smell of cigarette smoke. I think just seeing smoking being stigmatized, people doing less of it, but that really only happened when vaping became a thing. Like vaping allowed people to be more secret, like you couldn't tell, like the smoke was more like clear and not as obvious when you're vaping, and you didn't have to go outside to, like when you were smoking cigarettes, once it was banned indoors, or you couldn't do it indoors, or people wouldn't want to smoke in their house. They would, vaping, you can do it anywhere. You could do it indoors, you can do it outdoors. Most people would probably vape, and this is, my father's probably a good example of this, smoker for, I think he started smoking when he was like 6 years old. Mm-hmm. Like literally that was the age where I think he has for a cigarette. And he's 72 now, still smokes. Maybe he smokes less. I don't know. I think it depends on the day. But let's say he's been smoking for 70 years at this point. I think he actually tried vaping and then realized he's doing that more than he would be smoking. Because the smoke, you had to kind of step away from the party. You had to go outside. There's that, unless other people are smoking, there's a social aspect of it. It's not as much of a thing. I think vaping became this like social thing where it's really accepted.
I agree. I think culturally, it's socially acceptable to bring a vape and go out to the bars with your friends. And
I still look at people like they're crazy when they're vaping indoors.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because we know the science behind it, right? But it's just socially becoming more acceptable. And actually, when vaping first started, it was because people wanted to quit smoking. Mm-hmm. They, I guess there was literature out there that stated that vaping was healthier for you than smoking.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, but we're coming to find out that it's actually not. It's actually very harmful in other ways than what smoking is. Yep. But like you said, to your point of people were switching to this vape because it was more socially acceptable. It was easier. They had, better access to it.
They smelled nice. They smelled fruity.
Right, but when you're saying no to one thing, so when you're saying no to smoking, you're saying yes to 5 other things, which is now being addicted to vaping because it's more accessible.
Yeah.
And how it actually works on the brain, we can get into that later. But when you have that first hit of the day, you get that rush from that first hit, and then you're trying to chase that all day long, right? So the people who are then continuously vaping throughout the day, it's because they want that effect, and they're not getting it like they did at the beginning of the day. So it leads to this addiction cycle and then the breathing in all these harmful chemicals.
Yep. Yeah. I remember, when people were trying to just quit smoking before before vaping was a thing, before, there was like the nicotine patch, there was the gum, like that was really the
Hmm.
only options other than trading in for another kind of addiction.
Yep.
So a lot of people, when they would quit smoking, they would start gaining weight because nicotine and cigarettes were a appetite suppressant. So I remember this very fondly. One of my high school boyfriends, his dad, I mean, I grew up in like a blue collar town. Everyone smoked cigarettes. It was a very normal thing. Everyone I knew in high school smoked cigarettes. Everyone I knew in middle school smoked
Yep.
cigarettes. Um, I thankfully was never like a smoker. I actually did try to smoke for 3 months because my college roommate was like a chain smoker. And I said, okay, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to dedicate to try to see if I'm like into this. And I tried it for a summer and then gave it up. But I digress on that subject.
No, I think it's funny. It
Um,
reminds me of that episode of Friends.
mhm.
Um, so Jennifer Aniston, she was working with this fashion company. I don't even remember the specifics
Oh, I
on
know
it.
what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yes.
but everyone at work would go out for their smoke breaks,
Hmm.
and she really wanted to advance in the company. So she's like, I have to pick up smoking.
Right.
And it was just the funniest episode of her just like coughing up this cigarette smoke. And
Hmm. Hmm.
so there definitely was, like, to your point, a social aspect of it, of
Yes.
people wanting to be included or feel like they're missing out on these smoke breaks or,
Yep. Yep.
whatever it may have been at the time. But it's very funny.
It is. And I mean, it's comical now, but it is one of those things where if you look back on it, there's people that tried to quit smoking at that time. Like there was only so many options. Like eventually
Hmm.
Chantix came out, like the drug, and then Wellbutrin, I believe, was used as a smoking cessation drug. I know so many patients that tried Chantix and the dreams and like the different like side effects that came from that drug. I don't even know if it's still prescribed.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was the next thing. And then what's next?
Yeah.
Trading it in for something that
Well,
you think might be healthier, like trying, different things.
yeah. And people were switching over to it to quit smoking, like you
Yep.
said. But then it was glorified. It's been
Mhm.
glorified in high schools and college.
Well,
And
it's just spread everywhere. Like I remember when I was in hygiene school, I remember having a lecture about because vaping was new. It was like this new thing
hmm
that's like coming out, and we were taught like there's no regulation on this.
yep.
This is not considered an alternative to smoking or a way to help smoking. It's not healthier. So as a healthcare provider, we were told pretty much what we still know today. At that
Yep.
point, it was just like we don't have a lot of research on this, so we're just going to go ahead and just say it's not healthy and it's not whatever till we know more. It's like proceed with caution versus being
Yeah.
like, oh, this is great, and then now we know it's not great. So I never told patients that it was a better alternative,
Oh
and I
no.
think most healthcare providers would be in that same realm. And now we just have the data to back up
Yeah.
what's happening.
And it's interesting because when we talk about why vaping was considered a healthier alternative, it was
Mhm.
because of the lack of combustion with cigarette smoking, right?
Yes.
It didn't have that. But the actual vaping has a vaporization process. So we talked about this earlier that the particles of those chemicals, like formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, um, there are a few others. Like one I think was actually used in war for like tear gas, which is
Perfect.
crazy.
We should inhale that.
We should
Yes.
inhale that, right? But anyway, so it's vaporized into small particles. So it actually puts you at higher risk for it to be embedded into your lung tissue because it's gaining access to our body. And so people need to know the science behind this and need to know because when it's fruity and it's everyone's doing it and it tastes really good, it's like when I was in college, I fell victim to that. It's really hard to say no in those scenarios, but if
Mhm.
you know what you're breathing in and how it's a carcinogen, I think it's easier to say no.
Yeah, I agree. I think the more you know. Did you have Dare growing up?
No. Oh,
Drug abuse
yes,
resistance
yes, yeah,
education.
yeah.
I mean, the war on drugs is a whole other thing, but it's interesting. Like you can do what you can to try to like educate young people, and I think the less kids are smoking cigarettes, obviously,
Hmm.
but then more kids started vaping because I think it was more accessible, and you can do it so many more places.
Yeah.
Like I think, I mean, I know my husband's nephews, they were both just graduated college not too long, or graduated high school not too long ago, so they're in that like younger generation, and neither of them vape, thankfully. I mean, or what they tell us, but they're pretty honest. And but it was like all their friends vaped, all their all those things, just being around it. I think it was just it's almost like more people do it because So I think it's worse than smoking in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think now that the literature has come out, it is being proven
Well,
that it
yeah.
is worse than smoking because of all those extra things that are in there. It's not just tobacco. I mean, tobacco has its own, I think, pros and cons. There's actually some positives to certain dosages of tobacco that we
Hmm.
can talk about. But, the harmful effects of smoking, it's not like I think that whenever there's a trade-off of something that else to do as far like switching your addiction to something else, it's usually not healthier.
No.
Even like going from, hey, I'm addicted to cigarettes to, hey, I'm going to channel that into running 10 miles a day.
Yep.
Still running 10 miles a day is not always great for your body. Like
Yep.
there's a, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh,
Like a trade-off
too
or
much of a good thing can
right.
also be a bad thing, kind
Yeah.
of a thing. Like if you drink too much water, that's also a bad thing.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's the problem I think people face around the world is just trying to manage that addictive part of our brains.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I think that it's normal. It's normal for all of us to have an addiction of some kind, even if it is healthy habits,
Yeah.
right? Or healthier considered habits. But what happened with the vaping is, or why it's so detrimental to this population is if people who are in high school, like someone I know, I've talking with him and he's like, yeah, I started hitting a jewel when I was in high school and maybe like junior year, sophomore, junior year. And our brain is not fully developed then. So there's a lot of research out there on how nicotine really isn't that harmful. It's more of the way that we're getting the nicotine.
Yep, exactly.
And it matters on the age of the person. So, after the age of 25, our brain is fully developed. But if your frontal lobe isn't developed and you're getting this nicotine and you're getting the dopamine, the norepinephrine, the acetylcholine, I think it is, you're getting these, you can focus better and you're getting this dopamine, you're feeling really good. But what does that do to our body and our reward system, right? When we're growing up, it really just screws it up, right?
Right.
Like it,
Right.
so then what's the trade-off on that? So you're getting this all the time. Are you depressed now? Like are depression rates going up, in this younger population? Anxiety, ADHD.
Well, I think they are. I mean, who knows what the root cause of that is? Some people could put that on like a social media thing or
Yeah,
being more exposed in that way, but it could very much well be part of the vaping, I don't know, epidemic, whatever you want to call
it
it.
is.
Because there is no like get out of jail for there's no free lunch. There's nothing
Yeah.
like you can't do something without having some kind of effect down the road. And starting something so young, and they know this about marijuana. Like marijuana use, they know that if you have it at a young age, which a lot of my friends did, they smoked when
Hmm.
they were like in high school, and now we know marijuana can be beneficial to some people, but can also be very detrimental psychologically for certain people who are really predisposed for schizophrenia, predisposed for all those kind of pathways in their brain to just turn that on when maybe it wouldn't have been
Yeah.
turned on if they didn't, experiment with just that one thing when they were younger. So I think if anything, it's tough. I think it's tougher to be a kid, just as time goes on, more or less. I mean, I think things are easier as human beings as time goes on, obviously, but the peer pressure of it, and I mean, there's adults that do it. I mean, I
There
know
are.
people that are in their 40s and 50s
Yeah.
that go out with a vape. It's nothing. It's not just the kids,
Yeah.
um, which is kind of
Well, I think
funny.
that's to your point earlier of we all have addiction tendencies of some kind, or we were seeking that dopamine or that reward.
Mhm.
And when you've been introduced to something that it reminds me of like, I don't even know what to call it, but it's like a hidden danger, right? Like you don't think that it's dangerous because, oh, and a lot of these vapes actually have like little games on them. Like they have like touch screens.
Oh, really?
Like there's like a little game and then like if you and it wants you to hit it and then like you win the game.
Oh my
I'm not kidding.
gosh, really?
So it's like good marketing for them.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And but then people are like, "Oh, I have to keep hitting this."
Hmm.
Because they're young, they're targeting a younger population. But
Yeah.
then we're seeing more of the side effects because the younger population is utilizing this vape.
Yeah.
But to your point of like, even though they may not be as inclined to do it for the gaming or the little touch screen that's on it as you get older, it's still the same effect in your brain. So you're
Mhm.
still chasing that reward. So how do we move away from that and get that from something else, you know?
And that's a question for all time, I think, because at every point in history, there's something, I mean, it really comes down to what the people around you are doing and the
Hmm.
community that you surround yourself with and the healthy things you have in general. I don't think having vices is necessarily a bad thing.
Hmm.
Because like I was saying, like nicotine, and I don't know as much about, because there's different kind of smokeless tobacco and things
Yep.
like that. Like tobacco in itself has effects on vascularity. We
Hmm.
know that hands down, no matter what kind of delivery system, it changes the vascularity in your body. So if it's locally, like obviously the smokeless tobaccos don't have that heat that
Yep.
it gives into, um, but it's still a local irritant, and it's still something that can change the chemistry and maybe the genetics of where you're holding it or where you're
Yep.
putting it or the tissue response there. So any kind of irritation is going to elicit something. So, but then there's benefits of it. There's studies that show that nicotine can actually help combat like risk for Alzheimer's
Yep.
and things like that. But what's the dosage? You know what I mean? Like, what's it
Hmm.
like? Is it 1 milligram every week? Is it 20 milligrams in a lifetime? It's like, who knows that thing? So I think when people say, like, oh, this can help combat this, and then they just run with it, like, oh, it's totally healthy and fine. Like, it's like you're taking everything with just that one statement where I don't think that's never the truth. That's
Yeah.
never the truth with anything. Um, but it's interesting that there can, of course, there's benefits to it. Like you have that response that's positive. That's
Yep.
why people do it, but it just depends on how often and the dosage and
When we think about our bodies and it needs a blood supply, right? That blood is not moving as easily.
mhm.
So what is that doing to the aging
Sure.
process?
Yeah.
So people who may be, like me, who want a pretty face, right?
Right.
That
You can only do
that
Botox for so long.
right. So that the vape it decreases your collagen
Right.
reproduction, and so you're actually aging a lot faster, and you're putting yourself at risk for
Well, the
all of
cosmetic
the
part of it, I think a lot of people do think about because, I mean, and we talk about like premature aging of the teeth and the gum and like
yeah
gum health, like your gum and gums and bone, to put it simply. Obviously, it's called
yeah
gingiva. That heavily relies on the vascular system.
hmm
So if we have a decrease in the vascularity, your tissues are not getting blood supply, and that's why we have a more prominent periodontal disease or a more aggressive form of it, or
yeah
they lose bone or tissues faster. So again, what's the dosage that causes that? I don't have that answer.
right
But I think once you do it, there's that risk of, okay, now you're going to want to do more of it. Or there is that we have nicotine receptors in our body for a reason. But if we're adding that nicotine into our bodies to then stimulate those receptors, that's something external that's making your body change the way it's reacting.
exactly. And when we were talking about what's next, right? If people move from smoking to vaping, it's actually funny because people are now going back to smoking because like
Right.
it'll make me do it less. I don't have it with me all the time. I have to go outside and whatever. It's a funny cycle. But people are switching to these Zins,
Yeah.
which are nicotine pouches that
Yeah.
are locally delivered.
And there's different milligrams of that, which I
Hmm.
think that's why I can never say I'm completely against them because you can go as low as like a milligram, I
Yeah,
believe, up to maybe 10. I'm not sure like the higher
right.
dosage of it. But
I think they're like 12
oh,
milligrams.
okay, that's pretty
Yeah.
significant. Yeah. So, but then it's like, where are you holding it in your mouth? Is it in the
Hmm.
same place every time? Do you have a risk for gum recession? Do you
Yeah.
have a risk for periodontal disease? What's your overall health? What's your pH balance? Like, blah, blah, blah. I feel like
Well,
I could like go
no.
on and on, you know?
Yeah, no, it's true because if you're locally putting that into the same spot, we're going to see changes in your tissue,
Mhm.
right? And that's gum recession, that's increased risk of oral cancer, especially if you're an alcohol user. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people
Or
who
using alcohol mouthwash more a couple times a day. I think
exactly.
it's if you use an alcohol mouthwash more than 2 times a day, you increase your risk of oral cancer by X amount, something like
Crazy.
that. Yeah,
And so people they don't understand and then it's like, okay, well, you're trading one thing for
right.
another.
And compounding
Um
factors, obviously.
exactly.
Mhm.
Compounding factors and yes, I mean, people who quit nicotine, right? They're more likely to, or they're trying to quit. So this person's like, okay, I really shouldn't vape anymore. I know it's bad for me, and popcorn lung is a thing, and
Yeah,
all these studies are coming out. They're like, oh, let me switch to Zins. Well, to get the same dosage, people who are vaping all day long, they might be smoking an equivalent of like 2 packs a day. So then you're using this Zyn at a really high milligram, and then you're increasing your risk for cancer, right? Gum recession, all of these issues. So then they're like, okay, well then let me just cut back on the Zyns. Maybe I'll drink a little bit more, right? And
that's
then
100% what happens.
it does.
It does. It's if I'm not doing this, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Or hey, I'm going to cut back on this, but then the vice needs to still happen. Like the root issue of your and there's the argument of like something's going to kill us, so
right.
let's just do it.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Right.
But no, it is. It's this trend of, this is really harmful, so let me move to this. Well, then we find out that, this is actually harmful for you in other ways. I mean, inside of a vape, those chemicals, right, are like cleaning chemicals.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
That are banned in the US, but they're not, like you said, they're not regulated.
Well, if you think about it, you wouldn't like go under your like kitchen sink and like spray that in your mouth.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if I think about it that way, and obviously like there's a higher dosage of spraying it directly in your mouth, but the principle is still there. But if you think like how often people are using these things, it's pretty frequent. It's really the frequency of it that makes the huge. But you can't not use it frequently because it's addictive. Unless you're one of those few people like I don't have a very highly addictive personality, so I was able to like maybe try something and then be like definitely not. I guess my addiction is now sourdough bread making. Like I guess that could be my addiction, but which maybe has some consequences that I'll find out about later. But I just think it's about finding like cleaner, healthier habits, and it's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are resources out there for people though. I think there's this. I don't know, if you look on Instagram or TikTok, there's these ads for this device that you can inhale, and I think it has like vitamin B12 in it or something. I don't know. So I know that I don't know the specifics on that brand or what they are.
Really, but the oral fixation is a huge component of it as well.
Yeah. So they have resources out there for people. I don't want people to think we're telling you, do not vape, do not smoke, like don't use the Zyns, and giving you no tools, right? Yeah. I think there are like nicotine lozenges that you can use, and if you're over that threshold of the age of 25 and not using it, all the time, maybe there could be some benefits to that. Yeah. I'm not sure, but it's like, I think as long as we're spreading awareness on how harmful these little cute, gamey little Game Boy devices are.
I literally had no idea there was games on these things.
There are. It's crazy. And, we just need to spread awareness and stop the vaping. So. Yeah.
Find some good friends that don't vape.
Yeah, I think surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded and want to help you.
Well, that's just a growing thing in general. That's something that I had to realize in my like teens, early 20s, was the people that you surround yourself with literally reflect you as a human being. So if you don't want to be part of certain things, then and that's tough. That's probably the hardest thing, is changing one's environment and changing your friends. Yeah. But it just takes like little healthy habits. Yep. Go to a yoga class. Go to, whatever that may be. Yeah.
And knowing what your goals are. What are your goals? Yeah. Long term. Because that short term reward of that dopamine, or, when you're hitting that nicotine, is that worth, sacrificing what you may have in store for you long term, right? And your health. Whether that's oral health or overall health, it can affect it negatively in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of these studies that are coming out that are now directly correlating vaping with popcorn lung, which is a very serious condition. Yeah. People are, they're waking up to the harmful effects of it, and it's great.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just think the more time that goes on, we're always going to know more and more, and it's just trying to help the next generation or the younger generation or even the older generation just see just what the facts about things are. There's no more, we can just ignore this because we don't know enough yet. Yeah. Like it's not 20 years ago,
No, we know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, this has been very enlightening, and I hope listeners feel confident in their decisions. And we're not saying this is what you should do, but just here to give you the information, and you make your own choices. Yep. So.
We'll see you next time.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Don't forget to leave us a comment, rate us, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more great content.